Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of uLaw webinar. We're just going to start off with about talking about what we call uLaw InSights. We're going to be discussing why uLaw InSights or something like this, a software like this, is very important for your business. Why is it a game changer? So uLaw Insight is basically analytics. Now, when you're using a practice management software, you're basically, as you're practicing in your day-to-day, you're basically giving the software a lot of data. You're giving your client data. You're giving, all your matter data, basically dockets, disbursements, accounting data. Now, if the software can turn around and give you insights into this data in some form of collective way, what that means is this insights can actually start shedding light on your business, like how your business is doing. What are the rights? What are the wrongs? What is the aggregates? Even simple questions who is your best client? Who is actually not paying for a long time? These are analytics that a lot of big companies pay a lot of amount to actually get those data from. So if a software that is actually collecting all these can actually translate that into some business value questions, the value proposition is too high. So what we've done is we have kind of merged all these questions into a feature called InSights. So what we do is at every level, whether it's a client view or whether it's a matter view or whether it's an accounting view, we kind of take these data, munch them with very high powerful analytical algorithms, and then we present the concept in a very simplistic and a holistic manner. For example, if say you're working on 10 matters, when you look at these 10 matters individually, you'll get a perspective. But then when you look at all these 10 matters in a holistic view, you'll get a different perspective. Like, for example, you can say 5 matters were on small claims, 4 were on divorce, and 1 was on traffic. Now, at the end of the period, if you aggregate these 10 matters and actually look at them holistically, maybe the lower number of matters might actually have a higher feed into your revenue compared to the higher volume. So that can give you some indicators. And these are the places where uLaw InSights actually starts becoming slowly, a game changer. Now, generally, how is business visualization visualized? It's traditionally visualized in tabular data, like an Excel spreadsheet. You just take everything together and then put them in a spreadsheet, and then you start applying complex equations. Now, if you can just translate that visualization from tabular data to something like a pie chart, the visualization now takes it to the next level. Now, you're not just looking at raw numbers, you're actually looking at, ratios. So that's the advantage of pie charts. Now, if you can take it to the next level where you can actually show it in bar charts, now you're not only viewing it in comparatives, you're also looking at it in terms of aggregates. So that's where the power of bar charts actually come into play. And what we have done is we've even taken it to the next step is, can we actually take this data and take the aggregates and the pie and the graph ratios and actually present it as a simple Q&A? Maybe these are questions that you always had in your mind about your business, and can we try and answer them? Now, why is it a game changer? The game changer, it's primarily a game changer because, these are tools that large companies always have. They have it in their back pockets. They have labor that they can put against this. They can ask their assistant or they can ask some coworker workforce to actually go and dig into the analytics, hire some accountants, put it into a spreadsheet, and then analyze. Now, small practices or solo practitioners barely have time to just make ends meet and actually do that practice. Now, if a software can actually behave like that assistant or those workforce that actually does analytics, it's a huge game changer for that organization. Now, the cost of doing analytics has always been high. Software analytics is always very high because the algorithms are very complex, time-consuming, and because of that, the cost is always high in terms of labor. By bringing it into our software, what we're doing is basically you can do analytics at your off time. Maybe you're just traveling, by taking a local transport towards a court, and you have time in your hands, and you can use your mobile to actually surf and get analytics about your business. So that's the aim with which we have targeted InSights. Very simple analytics, presentable in tabular data, pie charts, bar charts, Q&A format that can actually change things. Okay. Finally, what is some of the benefits of some of the questions? Now, most of the questions are pretty straightforward and normal that you would ask your business, but there are also questions that you may not even thought about. Now, if you lost insight, our aim is to force all dimensional questions on the data and try and pull these insights one by one. So with not much delay, after talking so much, I'm going to now actually take us through a demo and walk through what are some of the insights that we can do, what are some of the questions that you would have had, for this matter. Okay, so with respect to that, I'm going to go straight into the data. So this is basically a uLawPractice account, a trial account that I created, and I created some matter here. And I'm going to just walk through the matter before I actually look into basically the insights. So this is a corporation called Fred Couplings. We just created an address and a phone number. And if I click on the matter, I created a couple of matters for them. One is Fred versus Jones, and another one was Johnson versus Fred Couplings. So it's basically two matters. There are quite a few events. We've done some flat rates, some pro bonos, some billing. We also did a lot of retainers, payments out of trust, some faxes, and some mileage and all that stuff. Similarly, in the other matter, very similar pattern. We basically put some time dockets. We put some retainer amount, some disbursements, and basically generated a couple of invoices. So about 2 invoices here in this matter, and in the other matter, we have generated about 2 invoices too. Now, what analytics can do is answer you some of the tough questions. Like what we do is we bring it out right in front of the matter. So you have a question mark, which is basically the questions that you have against this matter. And we actually hit the question. What the software does is it immediately queries the accounting information and tells you 2 invoices have been raised. The trust that was received so far is that much. That's the balance. That's the percentage. When was the last deposit done? When was the withdrawal done? When was the last invoice raised? What's the balance? This is pretty straightforward analytics, right? This is like just doing number crunching and just telling you what aggregates are. So this is first level of analytics that we can bring to you. Okay. Now, similarly, if you actually look at, some of the analytics that we can bring here, like for example, if you click here, this is more of visual analytics where we can tell you like, hey, if you look at your retainer to projected balance ratio, you're somewhere at about 73% of the total retainer that you could have consumed. Now, this is visually telling you that 2 things. One, you are in the green zone. That means you're actually billing well. Like 73% of the retainer you already consumed. That means you're not in the red zone. But also it gives you a second angle to it, which is it's telling you that, hey, the needle is reaching closer to max. That means maybe it's time for me to make a next phone call and get some more money. And we obviously want to visualize that as basically a pie chart or an ohm meter based on what kind of data is to give you that correct indicator perspective. Even more indicators here is if I kind of click here, it kind of tells me in this matter, even though I made closer to $600, 70% of that is actually only billable time. The rest is all disbursements. So 30% disbursements, maybe you can set yourself a target that in any matter, my disbursements to billable ratio should be so much. This visual indicator can tell you in 2 minutes, where you are with respect to, your targets that you actually set yourself. Now let's get into more details on accounting. Now, if these matters are aggregated, and if I actually go into accounting, I can kind of correlate them into FeeBook. So let's now look at what is Law Society actually recommending on FeeBook. The Law Society says if on a very regular basis, you need to generate what they call the FeeBook. So a FeeBook generally looks like this. The FeeBook is basically date, invoice, client, fee, the billable, HST, or whatever taxes are applicable in that province. I've just taken the Ontario one, and then the total billable. Now, just looking at this data tabularly, all it means is who's paid what. Now, if you combine these into aggregates, you'll get very, very powerful analytics. So let me do one simple analytical study of my FeeBook. So I'm going to do FeeBook. I'll do my monthly FeeBook. I'll just do download with the analytical button on. So now what the software is going to do is, first and foremost, obviously conform to the Law Society's guidelines, which is produce the fee book exactly like the way they've asked you to do, date, invoice, and all the details. So here, date, client, description, HST fee, it does that. Now, the next step is, can we start showing you aggregates right away? The first aggregate is, for this month, this seems to be the revenue that you've actually collected. Taking it to the next step, it looks like, hey, tribunal was really large in this month. All other ones like landlord and tenant fraud investigations were fairly low. And why was that? You can see right here, like that's the pie chart representation. That's the data in percentage, how the distribution was actually happening. And then it kind of gives you a bar view of comparison of who was there with respect to what. And then it starts naming you clients. So Ali Fraser, probably a tribunal client. There was a very high revenue here. Maybe that was even part of a settlement that got counted as a revenue. And then it starts counting other clients. Toby Daredevil is right next. BBC company is there. Jill Spencer. So it kind of lists you who are the clients that you need to focus better, who are the clients who are not, generating that much revenue. It's a very small matter. Then it kind of gives you an overall view that in this matter, in this period, 95% was legal work and 4.5% was disbursement. So even though on that particular matter, your target for disbursement to legal ratio was actually poor, in the overall scheme, you're actually doing well because, you're only 4.5% of your revenue, of your total income is actually heading towards disbursement. So that's basically what we call the bar chart and the pie chart view. Now, I want to take it to the next level. What if we can answer this as a question mark? So let's go back, do the same fee book for the month, but rather than doing a download with analytics, I'm going to do InSights. Now, what InSights does is it kind of gives it a different dimension. It says, hey, this is what we see, for that period. So the legal fee, the revenue that was generated during that period was that much, okay? The revenue and disbursements, right? Like that's the money that you just made by billing clients disbursement was that much. Kind of gives you an immediate view of how much. Tells you 95% is basically the percentage in terms of, where you were with respect to the money. And then it also tells you the percentage, in terms of where you were with respect to the disbursement. The next one is it's showing you fee book, total revenue, and then the highest revenue, and then the second highest revenue, and it goes one by one. It looks like my connection is a little down here. Let me quickly look at my Wi-Fi. I apologize for that. There seems to be some connection problem at my end, but I think everything is now back to normal. I'm going to redo the fee book analytics, so the InSights. Okay, as you see here now, the fee book, we're first starting off with the revenue, then the disbursements, the standard percentages, but then we start getting into who's the highest. Ali Fraser is the highest. Who's the second highest? And start rating them against each other, and then categorizing them as well, like, civil made so much, what's the percentage in civil, and what's the category families and will, how much it was. Now, if you would click on the detail, this is where we kind of laid out in a much more simplistic terms, which is basically as a question answer format, which is like telling you, like, if you just read it out as a question, like, we can kind of like put that numbers and this into perspective in terms of answers. For example, the total percentage of revenue between October 1st, 31st was like 95.5% was kind of revenue from legal work, while 4.5% was revenue from disbursement. And then we laid out in several questions that we have tried to collect over this matter one by one. Now let's move on to another kind of analytics, which is basically just looking at pure profit and loss statement. So if I would do profit and loss statement for the month, let's first do a download with analytics. So now what this is going to do is it's going to basically look at my monthly figures and tell me where has been all my revenue. What are the areas where I had the revenue, and where are the areas where I had my expenses. Then it splits it out into a very similar revenue chart, very similar to the fee book, and then opens it out as an expense chart where you're saying all the client expenses are about 78%. In this month, I only had one kind of expense, which was the rent, which took about 21%. And then lays it out in combination that this month is actually a great month because I had 95% revenue, while only 5% of that was actually an expense. Now, if we have to go and look at it in terms of insight, okay, and I'm going to now do, like, say, a quarterly insight. Let's look at, say, the previous quarter. I'm going to hit the insight. Now, it's telling me in that quarter, I actually operated as a profit. Next, I also operated in such a way that, like, the total income that was made during that period was this much. The expense during that period was this much. And then it says the income statement was basically telling you a net profit of this much. And when I hit the detail button, what it does is it takes this exact same information and translates that into a question mark category, telling you that, who was the highest, what was the lowest, who are the people whom you should actually be worried about. Like, for example, in this, it tells you, like, for hydro, in that period, you paid $218. For telephone, you spend that much. Maybe that's your biggest expense. For TerraView, maybe you're a real estate lawyer, you spend $500, right? Your rent cost you that much. So it kind of categorizes and tells you how much was your each and every highest expense, where should your focus be in terms of optimization. The next insight that we wanted to share with you was client-facing, like, for example, invoice balance. You would do a download of an invoice balance analytics. What this can do is it can basically analyze all your client with respect to the perspective of when you raised the invoice, when were they supposed to pay, and how long they haven't paid you. Now, there are some matters where you've actually taken retainer, and maybe it would have just slipped your mind to actually transfer from trust. In those cases, the analytics should be able to actually pinpoint to you saying that these are the matters where you're supposed to recover revenue straight out of your trust account, and you haven't actually done that. So let's look at some analytics that will be derived from that kind of an insight, and we will see the correlation between pending trust transfer and actually the amount that's left in trust. While that's being done, I also want to hit the insight button. Let me go ahead and do that so it can do both the calculations at the same time. There you go. That's the statement of invoice. Now, what it tries to do is, first of all, bring out the outliers. In analytics, it's very important that after you've analyzed your data, you have to bring out the outliers. For example, Mary Fernandez was the oldest client. She hadn't paid for several days. From 2013, she hasn't paid. Even though it's a small amount, it's a pure outlier. Like, she should have paid this long time ago. Why is she not paying it? So the first job of analytics is to actually bring out the outliers. Once it brings out the outliers in terms of the highest balance, oldest outpaying, someone who has not paid for a long time, the highest balance in trust, and who owes you for the longest time, then it's time for you to tabulate the data. Now, anything in red means you need attention. What does it mean? Like, for example, Emilda, you raised an invoice for that much. That's the money in trust, and you forgot to actually transfer that money in trust. Clearly tells you that it's an action that you were supposed to do that you haven't done. Helen Jones, for example, there's only 1 cent actually sitting as an outstanding balance. Maybe she's, it must just be a cent rounding. So, time for you to actually write it off. Or something like this where Frederick Jones from April 2013, he owes you $163.88, and he's actually not paying that. Maybe it's time for you to write it off. So it kind of gives you a perspective right away what to do and what not to do. Now, once you've reviewed all the data, now we know why it took so long because there's so much in this account. It kind of gives you a picture that how much is the total outstanding balance, how much of that is just recoverable from trust. So it looks like 10% of my money is just sitting in trust that I haven't even recovered, while 90% I had to actually make the phone calls and get my clients to actually pay that. And then if you look here, it kind of shows that ratio for each of the clients in bar charts, pulls the same thing as outstanding receivables, and then gives you a pie chart view of your outstanding client owes with respect to your pending trust transfer. Now let's look at the same data in analytics perspective. Here you go, kind of giving you the highest invoice balance, fourth highest invoice balance. Frederick Gomes is someone that you need to make a phone call, right? It kind of lays it out, and these are pending transfers. That means Walmart does not owe you money. You have forgotten to do the trust transfer. Same thing here, Rob's saying you haven't done the trust transfer. And when you lay it out as questions, it's even more simpler to understand. The next insight we want to talk about is what we call pro bonos. Now, in pro bono, basically as an organization or as a corporation, you must be doing a lot of pro bono. You always want to understand at the end who's getting the freebies for good. So if you actually go to our pro bono report, right, and then do say a long range, let me go from say September the 1st, it's about 2 months of data. And if you do an analysis, what we need to do is first lay out the data. Who is getting the pro bono hours? How much are they getting with respect to what they should have actually got billed? And then we start analyzing in detail, who are the top clients? How much is the ratio that's being actually spent on? So let's look at the pro bono report when it actually arrives. And we will get a good comparison of the extremes. While the pro bono report is actually coming, I'm going to do a couple of more report. I want to do an expense report for just this month. So that's pro bono report. So the pro bono report clearly tells you by every day how much each one is getting. Like, for example, on the 1st of September, this is what happened. 2nd of September, this person got a pro bono. So that's just laying out data as by itself. But then it starts analyzing and saying, in cumulatives, how much pro bono have you actually done during this period? So for 2 months period, it looks like you've done about 14 hours and 6 minutes of pro bono, which translates into a percentage of that much. Laying out, a structure, who is who and how much they got. Toby Batman seems to be the highest. The rest all are fairly equal because your pro bono structure is pretty equal. And then it calculates for this period your billable versus pro bono. So you're roughly hitting about 15% pro bono, which might be something that you might want to correct, for your future based on analysis. So that's your pro bono analytics. Let's look at now expense analytics. Expense analytics is pretty straightforward because the Law Society, for their expense ledger, wants you to actually show the clients exactly like the fee book. Now, once you've finished your expense calculation, you now want to get into analytics, where you are looking at all your categories, laying them out as percentages, laying them out as bar charts, and then trying to find who are your top expensive clients and how much have you actually recovered them, and how much is expense on client versus office expense. Kind of gives you a ratio where the money is actually going out of the business and what ratio it's actually. Now, this is all the analytics on accounting data. Let's now look at matter data analytics. So if I would go to this matter, and I'm just going to hit the question mark, what it's going to do is first show me the data as is. But if I hit the insights, what this will do is it will take the entire matter into perspective and lay me a lot of analytics on that. For example, this matter is fully invoiced. Now, if I look at it, a number of invoices that were done were 2. Some of the questions are pretty straightforward. Some of them are questions that we might have not even thought about. For example, it tells you like how much settlement was actually received on this matter, how much was actually paid out as settlement on this matter. What's the number of days when since you raised invoice? Like for example, it's about a day old. This invoice is about a day old. This invoice is actually generated today. It even tells you the number of matters that have dockets, how much hour has been spent, and how much pro bono has been given. What's the flat rate versus pro bono ratio? Okay, a number of faxes that were used in this document just gives you a view that there are 50 pages that were actually used in this matter. 23 of them were photocopies. The travel, it tells you like you spent about 40 kilometers of travel on this matter. So these are questions that that we were not even thought about by just looking at tabular data. So by looking at it from an insight perspective, it kind of turns the table. First, it will answer questions that you thought about, and second, it can actually answer questions that you have not even thought about. So similarly, now I'm going to go to the second matter and do analytics there. So this is straightforward analytics telling me that I need to do pending trust transfer. Like my thing is still my matter is done, but I haven't made the money. But when I actually click on InSights, the detail actually gives me a lot more. Similarly, now let's talk about client analytics. Now, client analytics is sometimes you just know the client, and you might have several matters against that client. Now, if you want everything to be laid out in a single perspective, you can just hit the question mark on the client, okay, and then you can hit the download button and have a quick look at it. Now, what this tells you is what's the total invoice for all the matters, what's the total that's been paid so far for each of the matters, what's the invoice balance on each of them, what's the trust funds, how much has been paid out of trust, how much is the trust balance, what is the pending transfer, how much is the balance that is being owed. It just calculates that. Now, this is like laying it out in tabular format, but if you actually look at it in InSight, now there can be even more questions. So now what it does is it aggregates the two matters and then gives you a perspective on an overall picture where you can ask him for like, hey, you owe me this much money. Where it tells you like the total amount of invoice that are generated on all these matters is this much. That's the total number of invoices. What is pending? So what has been paid so far? What is pending? Which matter is the better of the two? Which one is actually having the highest trust transfer? Kind of gives you like this holistic picture of just the client perspective. Another key aspect of analytics is not only looking at billed data, looking at non-billed data. So this is basically now talking about work in progress. So if you would look at work in progress reports, like for example, you can go to calendar and say action and just say I want work in progress. And let's say I want the work in progress for this quarter and hit the download button. What the software should do is it actually should look at all the dockets that were not billed for every client and tell you this is where you should bill them. Like for example, it straight away outlines that these are the dockets where you kind of have unbilled hours. These are the ones where it's not only unbilled, you also have flat rates that have that have not been billed. And then it points you that there are some dockets where you put the docket, but you've not even put billable time against them. So it immediately highlights you like those ones like, hey, you worked on them, probably you put some dockets, but you completely forgot to put billable time against them. So immediately in 2 minutes, you can kind of get an insight of where you are. A quick summary of unbilled hours versus the total kind of gives you how much revenue that you are supposed to make just because you haven't done the invoicing yet. Now let's look at the same data in InSights perspective. I'm going to do a monthly stat with InSights. And what that's going to do is it's going to now lay out questions. Okay? So it is going to say like the matter with the oldest unbilled is 28 days. So for 28 days, Bell versus Mary has not been billed, even though you've docketed. Okay? For 24 days, Day Huntsman a matter has you have not touched it, and it needs your attention. Now, for 7 days is the number of days in which Frederick Crash has not been billed. So it kind of brings out all those hours and all those dockets and matters that you have kind of lost in the weeds, so that you can start paying attention. That's the work in progress analytics. Finally, I would like to also bring in other value adds, like for example, timesheet reports. So you can say, hey, I want to do like a service summary report for this month. And what that will do is basically take all the data for the month and then calculate your service summary. So it'll tell you like, hey, the legal counsel in this time estimated so much hours but billed so much. The assistant who worked along with you estimated so much and billed, so that's the total. And then in terms of summary, it tells you like each person in the firm, how much hours has he worked and how much hours has he billed. That's the service summary. Now the client summary for that month can basically be how much were you planning for each and every client, and how much did you actually bill for each and every client. So in this one, it takes it client by client in that period and tells you like you plan so much, but you bill. Like for example, this one you actually planned 30 minutes, but you billed 2 hours and 18 minutes. This one you planned 30 minutes and you actually bill 30 minutes. Kind of gives you a view, how your time was actually spent. And finally, the last report is basically just the entire timesheet for this month, which would show you all the data, that in terms of time rather than revenue that was actually spent on this month. So that's on a daily basis. So that aggregates October the 1st, October the 3rd, October the 6th, 7th. Kind of gives you a daily view, and then and then it also gives you which ones were actually assistants and which ones were the main counsel, and then it also lays out estimated hours, billable hours, and then the service time. So that kind of summarizes the whole report in a whole. So to kind of bring back our theme on analytics, what we've kind of done in this webinar is basically try to show you places where the business analytics makes sense, and it can actually change the way you are actually thinking about your business, whether it is fee book, whether it is expense book, whether it's reconciliation statements, whether it is invoice out balance, pro bonos, client views, matter views, work in progress. Analytics kind of pay, they pay back their dividends right away. Once again, I want to thank everyone for attending our webinar. If there are any questions, I'll take it at this point of time. The conference, the lines have just been unmuted, so if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and ask. If not, thank you very much for your time. We hope you guys gained some insights into our feature. This feature is not only available in the format that I showed you in our web format. It's also available in our app. So if you would download our Android app, you can actually consume all these analytics on the fly in your mobile as well. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.